Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and we've got a very, very special kind of, super quick, thrown together show for you. Whitney Webb reached out to me this morning, and I missed it. I'm a chump. I saw it a couple hours later. I said, wow, I still would love to get you on. There's been so much going on in the world. In fact, I think I talked to you maybe 2 months ago trying to get you on about the series of basically the thing Max Blumenthal just picked up on. You've been screaming about Palantir and pre-crime forever. We've talked about it on this show. And finally, it's starting to make its way in the, I guess, more acceptable alternative media, to say the least, which is good. Yeah. Which is good because now it's starting to get out there, and even people like, Jimmy Dore, who have taken the jab, now are out there saying, hey, I took this thing. It did not work. It caused me to get sick, and I refuse to bow down. So we do need those things, but it's really important to be paying attention to your work, which is on the cutting edge. I think to myself, even pre-January 6th, when I was discussing going down in D.C. and we were talking about the possibilities of false flags and this becoming some kind of a new 9/11, and sure enough, here it is. So, guys, if you're not familiar with Whitney Webb, Unlimited Hangout is the website. That's where you find everything Whitney Webb. But she's also on this platform, Rockfin. I saw that you had a new program out. You recently interviewed James Corbett. I watched that. It was excellent. She wanted to come on today to talk about the Facebook Meta. Facebook owns Oculus. This is really a transhumanist movement at the end of the day. That's what all of this is, and this is just another step in it. But I know you're also working on another series via Moderna. And one of the things I've been harping on to my audience, is that Moderna is basically DARPA. They openly partnered with one another back in 2013 in front of the world for messenger RNA. And these shots that are either mRNA or vector-based are basically bio-nano defense tech. There is no doubt about it. That is what they are. And if you are still denying that, you simply haven't done your homework. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to give you the floor, Whitney Webb. What do you have on Moderna that you can share with us pre-series, and then let's get into Meta?
Yeah, sure. Wow. Well, you also covered a lot of stuff even at the beginning, too, about some of the recent shifts we've seen in the independent media scene. Max Blumenthal has started talking about digital ID. That's very nice to see. But he's been doing that with Jeremy Lafredo. I do want to bring attention to Jeremy because he's been doing great work over the past year and a half. Including several contributions to my site, Unlimited Hangout. So it's very nice for him. Nice that he's getting more of the exposure he deserves. This recent series at Gray Zone, though, touches a lot on the Vaccine Credential Initiative. I reported on the Vaccine Credential Initiative back in January. So people that would like to see some maybe earlier reporting on that particular initiative, including the MITRE Palantir stuff, I can refer you to that article, which is on my website. For those that may be interested, hopefully, we'll see other guests maybe be invited on Jimmy Dore as well. That might, not just myself, but someone like Corey Morningstar, maybe, that have been in this space for a very long time and bring a lot to the table, and also some of the bigger picture views. But it's certainly, better late than never in the case of some of these figures, because, as people like you, me, Ryan Christian, Derek Rose, and others have been saying for the past year and a half, we're really facing this is an all hands on deck type of situation. So even if some hands come on deck late in the game, it's certainly better late than never as far as I see it. Now, in terms of Moderna and DARPA, there's actually a connection between that and the Facebook metaverse stuff, because who was the head of DARPA when they made that partnership with Moderna? It was Regina Dugan, who later went on to make a DARPA equivalent, Building 8, for Facebook, which developed a lot of the stuff that their metaverse rebranding Meta is going to be using, including some of the wearables that claim to allow you to type with just your thoughts. What else will it know about your thoughts? That's a question we should be asking as well. And I did an investigation earlier this year into the Wellcome Trust, which is sort of, you could argue, is sort of like the UK's version of the Gates Foundation, and in terms of its influence on medical research over the years. They have their own DARPA equivalent now called Wellcome Leap, that's expressly targeting children and infants with this wearable invasive surveillance technology. and Regina Dugan is now in charge of that. Right. So this is someone who bridges the world between Silicon Valley and Facebook in this healthcare space, because the Wellcome Trust is sort of a medical research healthcare oriented group. And then you also have her being behind DARPA's team up, not just with the mRNA program at Moderna, but also at Pfizer. And of course, those are the two COVID-19 vaccines using mRNA that are currently on the market and were given emergency use authorization.
And let me just stop you for a second, because I really want people to understand that it even goes beyond this with the Defense Department and COVID. COVID has been a wherewithal of excuses to bring DARPA technology into the public. We now have the robot dogs, for instance, in Honolulu at the homeless camps. And what are they for? Oh, well, we can take your temperature and have a two-way conversation for COVID. Sophia the robot now has for COVID. Yeah. And Sophia the robot has her sister. This is Hanson Robotics. I know that we DM'd back and forth a little bit about this, where now this is your new nurse. It's Grace. It's not Sophia. And again, it's a two-way conversation. And this is an international push. And just, I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Milken Institute started talking about just AI algorithms that you will interact with that will then not only give you medical advice, but then write you scripts and give you medical treatment. They are trying to automate people out. And the thing is, we have doctors that have pushed back because they are still human beings. They have a thing called empathy for one another. They can actually resist the programming that all of us are constantly bombarded by. Robots cannot resist that programming, Whitney. And that is the overall point of this whole thing, because the more of this you bring in and you legitimize and you integrate the Defense Department with Silicon Valley, with basically our government, it blurs the lines and they act like the saviors like they have the last 18 months. I'm sorry for the interruption.
No, I mean, that's a good point. But I would point out that some of these Silicon Valley companies from the very beginning have been intimately tied to the national security state. Google being a big one, Palantir, of course, being the most obvious. But Facebook as well. So on an article on my website called The Military Origins of Facebook, talking about Facebook really having come out of DARPA's LifeLog program, put on the map as a company by Peter Thiel. At the same time, he was going around reviving failed DARPA programs, including Total Information Awareness, which essentially became Palantir, as private sector ventures to sort of take away the direct military connection, which was ultimately why Total Information Awareness and LifeLog and those things were controversial in the mainstream press, was because of the military connection. Peter Thiel worked with neocons like Richard Pearl in the Bush administration to make it an entirely private sector venture, coordinating with people like John Poindexter, who was running TIA for DARPA, and of course is an Iran-Contra criminal. A lot of this stuff, as you know, goes back to continuity of government type stuff from that particular power nexus responsible for Iran-Contra back in the Reagan administration. So Facebook, when we're looking at them, for example, in their metaverse rebranding, we're fundamentally looking at something that has its origins with the national security state, because that is what it has enabled companies like Facebook and the biggest companies in Silicon Valley to do what they do and to grow as large as they have, is because they all have some degree of coordination with the national security state. Facebook, Microsoft, Google, have been feeding information to the NSA for well over a decade. Several companies like Google and Microsoft are U.S. government and U.S. intelligence contractors. Palantir also is that, of course. So all of these companies, there's really no clear line separating Silicon Valley from the national security state. And you see this in things like the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, headed by Eric Schmidt. The vice chair of that was Bob Work, who was Deputy Secretary of Defense, working together. And basically that entire commission is Silicon Valley, the military, and the intelligence community, the CIA.
So let me stop you there. You know, one of the documents I keep talking about, because it was just so damn spot on, is this Future Strategic Warfare NASA document. And in it, this is just one of the pages. you talk about inexpensive Trojan horse civilian systems. That's what Google is. Google, like you said, not only has all these contracts, but at the same time, they work with NASA on artificial intelligence, on quantum computing. Okay, they have the largest operating system in Android in the world. They're on Chromebooks. They're on more devices than anything else. They have the largest search engine in the world. They have the largest video platform in the world, okay? And all of these government contracts at the same time, they're largest of the outer shell, Alphabet. You had Eric Schmidt as the CEO for how long, and on the National Security Council, and a steering member along with Peter Thiel, I guess your right and left side, right, in Bilderberg. And you look at a document like this, and it's got what's inexpensive information, internet, and psychological warfare. A lot of that lately. A lot more talk of binary, in other words, nanoparticles in your food supply, binary bio into your food supply. That's being discussed. This document, and by the way, this guy's still in power. Dennis Bushnell's still around. It talks about population stabilization by 2025. And it's in conjunction not only with DARPA, but things like, the Australian Defense Department. Now, I want to point out, you can see that Australian DoD, by this time, this is a 2001 document, Australia had pretty much been taken by the globalists. In other words, they had been disarmed. They no longer had their weapons. And if you look at it, other than the United Nations, Australia is really the only one that gets a spot in there out of these westernized nations. Why? I don't know. It seems like, especially with what's going on, Whitney, some of this technology they've been talking about has now already been implemented there, aka these apps where you're locked in your house and you have 15 minutes to scan your face and your geolocation, correct?
Yeah, and they're going even farther than that in Australia. They have legislation on the books to really bring this ID 2020 digital biometric ID thing into, full play. They've been talking about for years there, and we're seeing it now in the UK and France specifically, having that ID being tied to your internet activity specifically, starting with your social media accounts, but really it'll be tied to all of your internet activity at some point as they see it. And that is an ambition of the World Economic Forum's partnership against cybercrime that includes the FBI, Israel's government, the UK government, but the US government's intimately involved. And also some of the main entities involved there are Wall Street banks, some of the biggest banks in the world that have an interest in seeing this happen. You always have the bankers there driving policy because, if you control the money, you can influence policy.
Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and that was an excerpt of today's interview with Whitney Webb, which is obviously a little too hot for YouTube. There are things we discuss in there that would probably get my channel pulled once again. So make sure to go over to rockfin.com, make the free account, follow myself, Whitney, and so many others, check out the video, and then if you do want to support the program and endorse my channel for $9.99 a month or $99.99 a year, save yourself $20, you get everybody's premium content. And remember, I couldn't do it without you guys. So enjoy the rest of the interview over at the Rockfin.